68% of it is undeveloped forest. So that means only 20% of Marion County is actually settled. Perfect place for a nice little creature to hide out, right? And over the years, as I started doing research and looking into the kind of things that had gone on around here, I found several different things that caught my attention. For example, I did not know it, but we have a Caddo Lake monster. It's not as cool as others. You've probably heard of the Loch Ness monster that they call Nessie. Great, right? They also have a Lake Champlain monster, which they call Champ. Ours is called Cypress Cindy, which is so hard. I wish they would have let me name it. I would have come up with something. But it actually is a lake monster that was seen a number of times and for quite some time went on and on and on. That was one choice. Also had chupacabra. Now, of course, the origin of that is down in South America, but just yesterday afternoon, I was over at the Bigfoot Cigar Lounge, great place to hang out, and a friend of mine actually said, yeah, I have to drive to Longview every morning at 5 a.m. in the darkness. He goes, I've seen them. I don't know, I haven't, but certainly a lot of people around here have. We have one here in town. If you had a good arm, you might could hit the pond with a rock from where we are standing right now. It's called the Monster of Round Pond. And it's a local legend around here, but there's always the big guy, right? I like the big guy. And that's what I want to talk about today. Now, what I'm going to tell you about is the case of Scotts Creek Bridge. And it happened a number of years ago. All the way back in 1965 was when it started. Now, we have at least 1 to 2 Bigfoot reportings here in Jefferson or Marion County every year. And statistically, they say that only about 1 in 10 gets reported, which means there's probably a lot more than that. But back then, on August 20th, this is Scotts Creek Bridge, by the way. And I like the fact that this is about 3 to 4 miles from where we're standing. I love stories that don't take place in the Pacific Northwest or the mountains of Colorado. You can actually go here really easily, which I do. And I'm still looking for that elusive footprint that I can fill full of plaster and show. But anyway, so it's not far from here at all. But back on August 20th, this was a headline for a local newspaper, the Jefferson Gimplique. Youth spots 7-foot-tall monster near Scotts Creek Bridge on Farm to Market Road 1324. Well, it was a 13-year-old boy walking down Scotts Bridge Road. Now, where this actually is, we're down here at the Visitor Center, and it's only 3 to 4 miles from where we are right now, depending on how you drive, which route you take. So, I live right there, so quite often as I'm going by, I'm just going to swing by, just for the heck of it. Well, on this particular day, this young man was walking along the Farm to Market Road, which right here, his house was right around here, Highway 59. And as he was walking along, he saw the brush and the tree line moving. And he thought, oh, there's a critter over there. Well, like any self-respecting 13-year-old boy, first thing he's got to do is get a rock and throw it at him. So he did. He reached down, he got a rock, and he was just crossing over the bridge at that point. He threw it into the underbrush and it kept moving. So he thought, well, this is cool. He didn't know if he was about to flush out a deer, maybe a wild hog, or something like that. Picked up a second rock from the side of the road, hurled it into the shaking undergrowth there, and the thing that was making all the movement came out. He described it as a 7-foot-tall creature covered with black hair. The creature stood and looked at him, and I have friends that are Bigfoot investigators and hunters. They go out in the middle of the night in the woods, and they would tell you at this point, the thing to do is be very still, be very quiet, show that you don't have anything to harm it with, try to see if there was any way to open communication. And that's well and good for them. Me, I would run like hell. That's what the 13-year-old boy did. He shares my same sentiments. He tore out toward his house, running down the farm to market road. I have a quote from the newspaper he gave. It said, quote, "I ran as hard and fast as I could toward Highway 59, but after I'd run for a long ways, one of the soles of my shoes came loose, and I had to stop and take them off so that I could run faster." Well, as he was taking his shoes off, he looked back and he didn't see the creature pursuing him, but he kept running. I'm there, brother. I understand. Well, he got home, came bursting through the door. His mother saw him, and his mother later told the newspaper that he was in hysterics when he got in. She also looked down and he was tracking in blood. He was running in bare feet on the pavement, and his feet were just cut to ribbons, blistered. So she got him off and started tending to that, and he started telling her what he saw. And she said, "We should call the sheriff's department." Well, they called the sheriff's department, and my first thought would be they might be a little bit, kind of hesitant to come out and waste time with this. Turns out, no, they were very interested in this because just 3 months earlier, they had gotten another report just like this of a big, hairy, 7-foot tall guy. And so this was the second report in 3 months. They were very interested to check it out. So they did. They came out, they started looking around the area to see if there was anything that they could tell, identify this thing or, kind of corroborate the boy's story. And they went, looked under the bridge. I took this just a few weeks ago. This is the bridge. This is the highway up here. And underneath the bridge is a dry creek bed. So perfect place for looking for tracks. There's usually not a lot of water there unless you get rain. Today it's probably really moist, but this is the dry creek bed. If you stand in the creek bed and look away from it, you can see it continues on. And there's a pond that feeds it. And there's a lot of water, rain, and things that actually makes the creek bed fill up with water. But this particular day, again, I saw nothing, but they looked all around and they didn't find anything. They then decided to go look under the bridge itself. And they did, and they found a beautiful, pristine track. They said it looked like a human track, but a lot bigger. They instantly knew it was no animal that was indigenous to this area. But then they kept searching under the bridge, and they found something even more interesting. What they found was not hair from a Bigfoot. It wasn't Bigfoot scat. No, what they instead found was laundry. It was stacked up nicely. This is the weird part about the story. This fascinates me more than Bigfoot. They found 4 pairs of men's work pants that were well worn, size 32 to 34. 5 pairs of little boys' jeans, size 5 or 6, and 3 men's caps, all on the dry creek bed, stacked very naturally there. One of the sheriff's deputies gave a statement to the newspaper saying, quote, "The clothing looked as though someone had just finished ironing it and had neatly stacked it together for storing in dresser drawers." I love this. Nothing to do with Bigfoot. But I told you, I like weird things, right? And of course, the first thing that goes through my mind is, oh my God, they found the secret Bigfoot laundry. I'm teasing. I shouldn't be making fun of it, but I'm just completely fascinated by it. If it was a hobo living under there, he wouldn't stack his clean clothes up. What the heck? Well, we're going to stop talking about laundry now and get back to Bigfoot. But to me, I just love that aspect of the story. Well, they continued to see things at Scott Creek's bridge. There's a lot of noises that were heard in the night. You have to realize this is a very sparsely populated area. There are people who have lived there forever, and they're very familiar with all the wildlife, very familiar with all the animals. And they started hearing these screams in the night, and yells and growls, things they weren't familiar with at all. A lot of them got together and like, let's go find this thing. Got their dogs, got their guns. Nothing. But it started getting more and more publicity from local TV stations and local newspapers. And then a week later, on September 9th, the Jim reported more monster tracks were discovered near Scotts Creek Bridge again. This time, there was a dirt road that intersects the road. It goes perpendicular to it. And on the south side in the dirt, the track started out. Obviously, they crossed the road. But then when they got back in the dirt, and this is an artist's rendition of it, but they saw him going off into the woods. Went about 300 feet and then disappeared into the woods. This is what it actually looks like. So it's right up here. Now it's gated, but according to the people that saw it, the sheriff's deputies, they said it only went about 300 feet before disappearing. So, again, more fodder for this whole monster thing, and more people started coming to town. More people started looking for it. They said that a group finally did see the creature, and they had their guns, and they took a few shots. Didn't hit it, thankfully. But finally, things started to kind of die down. And then something happened nearby. This is Scotts Creek Bridge. This is the old Foundry Cemetery. Again, not far from here at all. And it's a very peaceful place. It's not associated with a particular church or organization or anything. It has a chapel where you can have your funeral. The cemetery is fenced behind this. And over to the left, which you really can't see, there's a big pavilion, because this is the South. So if you bury somebody, the next thing you are required to do is feed the family. So that's where you get out the fried chicken and the mashed potatoes and serve up for the family. So it's a really peaceful place, and I love going out there. But Mrs. Mary Manning, who lived nearby, and her 12-year-old daughter Rosemary, and a visitor from Tyler, who was with them, a family member named W.L. Sharp, or Mrs. W.L. Sharp, I should say. They were out visiting the plot of one of their family members, and from out in the woods, because the whole thing is surrounded by a really heavy wooded area, they heard a growl. Ms. Manning told the newspaper later that, quote, the growl did not sound like a mad beast, but was almost a startled sound. So she goes home and tells her husband. And of course, the husband says, all right, let's go. So they go out there. They're walking along the area on the outside of the cemetery, this is the interior of the cemetery. This is where the tracks were found that they saw. They did find tracks that day. So they went and got some pears, put them out, started checking. 2 days later, they found more tracks, and they found the pears had been eaten. So they started telling their friends. More and more people went out to see it, and there were more and more tracks sighted out here. I walked the perimeter of the cemetery, and in the corner right back here, I noticed the trail going off into the woods. And I thought, this is going to be perfect. I'm going to be talking about this here in a few days. I should go down this trail and find out what's there. And then I started thinking, nobody knows I'm here. My wife doesn't even know I'm here. If I go into that little area, that's all shaded and hidden, and some creature, Bigfoot or otherwise, has me for lunch, it'll be weeks before they found the body. So I let discretion be the better part of valor, and I just took the picture and moved on. But as it turns out, at that pavilion here, not long after that, the old Foundry Cemetery had their annual board meeting, and it was held in that little chapel. And then they had a big lunch feast out here afterwards. And as they were cleaning up, they thought, we've been hearing about this monster around here. Why don't we take our table scraps, instead of throwing them away, and put them on the outside of the fence, outside the cemetery, just see what happens. They did that. Sure enough, a few days later, when I went back to check, it was all gone, and there were more huge tracks. There was a deputy sheriff who was called out to see it again. Bill Freese was his name, and he had been telling everybody not to worry. He hadn't seen the tracks yet, but he said, obviously it's not a monster. Obviously it's a black bear. And black bears aren't common in Marion County, but they have been seen. He called it a honey bear. He said, quote, the animal is a honey bear that it's not going to harm anyone. Nobody can be concerned about this. And he was very adamant about that until he saw the tracks that day. He said they were human, but they were a lot bigger than we would make. Somebody else gave the newspaper a quote, "Whatever the animal is, it is extremely large and heavy as the tracks sink into the hard ground that even a heavy man failed to dent with his shoes." So at this point, they knew they were dealing with something much different. Well, most people think that it was the same creature being seen because this is Old Foundry Cemetery, this is Scotts Creek Bridge. If you look, it's just a little over 4 miles as the crow flies, or the Bigfoot walks in this case. But more and more interest. This went on for several more weeks, but that was the last time that anybody actually saw any evidence of the monster at that time. Now, the guy who was writing all these stories for the newspaper, the Jefferson, his name was Dwayne Dennis. And this is a clip from Weird Travels, and they actually tracked him down and asked him about this. And he quoted, on screen that when he had heard about it, he said, quote, "I wanted to break the news, so I didn't tell anybody about it at first. The boys saw something. My wife Virginia and I went down the Scotts Creek Bridge where Johnny said he saw the creature. I went down there and saw a lot of snakes. I also saw 2 footprints. The next day we happened to be at a cemetery nearby. At the entrance we saw a fantastic footprint with 5 claw marks. I put some salt in it to make it out more clearly. We also saw a pear tree with limbs up about 8 feet off the ground that had teeth marks in the fruit." And talking about the footprint, he said, "It would have taken an artist to make that footprint. It was yay long, 5 toes, and I just don't think a person could make something that quick and be that realistic. And that puts me in a place where I think it's true." Well, what happened to that 13-year-old boy? He is alive today. He does not live in Jefferson. He lives nearby, and a Bigfoot researcher that's a friend of mine, Ken Gerhardt, actually tracked him down, called his house, and his wife answered, and he asked for her husband, and she said, "Can I tell him what this is about?" He said, "Yeah, I want to talk to him about the Bigfoot he saw when he was 13. And she said, "Yeah, he doesn't talk about that anymore." And I can only imagine that throughout his life, he got a lot of ridicule. Today, it's a very popular thing. If he would talk about it, he would be at the conference today speaking about it, not me. But he wants to keep quiet about it. But the fact that he doesn't want anything to do with it tells me there's probably a little bit of credibility to that, because he's not getting any money off of it. He's not writing books. He just doesn't want to talk about it anymore. I also find his account really, really interesting, because if he was going to fake this, if he was going to just try to get some attention or play a joke, he wouldn't tear up the bottom of his feet. After he had run away from this creature and got home finally, it was probably days before he could even walk again. He had to nurse his feet back to health and let the wounds heal. Nobody would go to that just for the heck of it, I don't think. So I have to really, really believe that he saw something that day, and I think with the descriptions of the things the other people saw, heard, and the footprints, I think it's pretty obvious, at least to me, what it is. Now, the greatest thing about this particular story is, like I said, it's not far from here. Quite often, if I'm driving around and I've got a little time to kill, I'll go out and look at either the cemetery or at the bridge. And I've got my parking place scoped out by now, so I know exactly where to park. And I do watch for snakes and things. But if you would like to, I have instructions on how to get there for you. It'd be nice if you had a map. I've got better than a map. I actually have instructions on exactly how to get to this bridge. So instead of a map, come by my table. I've got 2 framed instructions. One is how to get to the bridge. The other is how to get to the cemetery. And if you have some spare time while you're in town, or if you come back to town for another purpose and decide that you have a little bit of extra time that afternoon, just go out there and take a look. I would warn you to be careful. Dwayne Dennis saw snakes out there, the newspaper reporter. That's very possible. There are also other creatures that come around out in the woods that can hurt you. So I would ask you to be really careful. And also, probably the most important thing is the cemetery. Nothing's ever been seen inside the fence of the cemetery. The cemetery is hallowed ground. So please don't do anything disrespectful. But everything takes place on the outside perimeter. That's the interesting part to check out. And if you're really, really careful, you're very, very quiet, and you have your camera with you, you might actually be able to catch a glimpse of this creature. And if you catch him by surprise, there is absolutely no telling what he might be doing. Who knows? Thank you guys so much. Come to something fun.